So part of the webinar series that we're going to be going over today will be the FW overview. We're going to try to do one of these webinars once a month, if not once every couple months. As we go through the webinar, towards the end, I'll talk about how you as a customer or partner can provide us feedback on stuff you want to watch and learn about. So we're going to start off today by first thing showing off a couple things that are new to EZ-IO. If you've been with EZ-IO for a while, thank you very much. If you're brand new to EZ-IO, hey, thanks for joining. So first off, we have modified our website. So if you go to ezio.com, we now have region-based websites. So wherever you are located at, you can click on the region, and that will take you to the associated web page. So for the Americas, we have ezio.pro, and there's information here. We like to keep it kind of down and dirty, so not a whole lot of glitz and glam. So really just get you the information you need. As we continue going through this, I'll show you other parts and pieces of the website that you can kind of get some good information on as far as like training, webinars, and stuff like that. All right, so let's get right into it. All right, so we're going to start off really quick today by talking about our roadmap. Just because I have everyone here, it's really nice for me to talk about our roadmap. I think people like to know what's new and upcoming as well. So just a quick little update on what we have going on and what our plan for this year is going to be. So we're going to be modifying some of our products to make them bigger, better, faster, more security, and that type of stuff. So for our FW series controllers, which is what we're going to be learning about today, we're going to be increasing some of the security features, like implementing WPA Enterprise, which is a secure wireless protocol, as well as 802.1x, which is going to be like a node authentication scheme. So I'll talk more about those as we get into the FW. So we're planning on having that out in Q2 of this year, which is great. The best part about this is because we are going to be on the customer's IT network, we are going to be compliant with what they need us to do to be network secure. All right. And our FS32 controllers, we're adding a bunch of stuff inside of it as well. We're going to be adding a VPN client server functionality inside of the controller, so you don't have to have a third-party program running on a PC or server. We'll actually be able to do it at the controller level. We're also going to be implementing the 802.1x security authentication scheme as well. And then IPv6, which is kind of a network compliant for IP addressing. And then one of the most anticipated things is MQTT. If you are not familiar with MQTT, I definitely suggest doing a quick little Google search on it. MQTT is a very lightweight IoT integration protocol, similar to like a BACnet communication or a LANWorks or Modbus, but it's very, very lightweight, and it's meant to be for the edge style devices that don't have a lot of processing power and that can't take the whole BACnet stack or something along those lines. So definitely, if you're not familiar with it, I suggest looking into it. We will have the MQTT out end of Q1 of this year. And then some of the other stuff might, like the VPN might float into Q2, but we're trying to get everything out of Q1 of this year. All right, so those are some of the enhancements to our existing products. Let's talk about some new products relatively quickly. So new products, we are coming out with an FW28 controller. So when we came out with our FW series, we listened to our customers, and our customers said, hey, we really need more DOs on these controllers. So we decided, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to come out with a brand new controller that's got more DOs. So just like our other FW series controllers, which we're going to learn and talk about more today, they're wireless, but they do have the ability to have more IO control. So this fits a very, very nice sweet spot of having between a unitary style controller and a full-blown plant controller, and it's got wireless capabilities. So very, very neat product. We're very excited about it. Again, we're planning on coming out with that in the second quarter of this year as well. We are going to be coming out with an FS20 controller. So if you're familiar with our FG series and our FS series, The FS20 will be just like the FG20, except have the horsepower and the processing capabilities of our FS series. So much faster, much more RAM, much more storage capabilities on the board itself with a lower IO count. So again, it fits that nice sweet spot where you don't really want to have an FG20 because it doesn't have the processing capabilities to do your HTML5 graphics, and you don't really want to go all the way up to the FS32 because it's overkill. So that FS20 will fit right in there really, really nicely. Again, second quarter of 2019 is the planned release date. Okay, our FT04 series, or I should say our FT series of controllers. This has got a lot of buzz and everybody loves them. So our FT04, you might have seen that, or you potentially might even have one to test and play with. This is the smallest BACnet IP Wi-Fi free programmable controller in the world. So it has 4 points of, 2 universal inputs, an analog output, and a digital output, so 4 total points, excuse me. It fits in a 2x4 box. It is a Wi-Fi AP as well as can connect a Wi-Fi client. So we've taken that footprint that we've been kind of playing with as far as IO control, and we're going to do more with it. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to make it a Modbus RTU to a BACnet IP gateway. So if you have something like a Modbus meter, you could put one of these really close to it, run Modbus RTU, connect it to the Wi-Fi network, and now you have Modbus RTU to BACnet IP communication via Wi-Fi. Very, very cool. The next one that we have is going to be a BACnet MSTP to BACnet IP router. Very excited about this. So essentially, just like what you've been using in the past, except that it's going to be in a smaller footprint. So you'll be able to take a BACnet MSTP network, plug it into the controller, have the controller connect to the customer's Wi-Fi network or your own Wi-Fi network, and you'll be able to route BACnet MSTP to BACnet IP. Very, very cool. Again, planned launch is second quarter of 2019. For the FT04, the actual controller itself, we've had these out for a while, beta testing. So we're just trying to fine tune some of the UI and some of the programming capabilities into it. So that should be out relatively soon. Very excited about that. All right, we are coming out with an FD20Di. This is a digital input only board, so it's going to have 20 inputs, and it will be BACnet MSTP. You'll have programmability and discover only functionality. So people that are going to be doing some type of monitoring on things, you will have the ability to bring that in. We've got a lot of demand for this overseas, in the Middle East and in the Europe regions, so that's why we came up with it. At this point in time, there's no planned release other than we're trying to get it out in 2019. Obviously, there's no picture there because we do not have a working prototype yet, but we're pretty excited about that. Again, that fills a gap where you just need to monitor only. We're going to have a PoE adapter because we know that a lot of the controllers in the industry are moving to the IP network. And a lot of the IP networks have PoE, which is also known as Power over Ethernet. We want to be able to have that Power over Ethernet cable coming from the network, splitting the power and the data, and then being able to provide power and data to a controller all in one wire. So that's what that splitter is going to allow us to do. So that'll be out sometime in 2019 as well. So that is just a very quick little product overview of what we have, some of our roadmap overview of what we're going to have, some of the products, as well as some of the enhancements to our existing products. So we hope you found that interesting. And just keep your eyes peeled. There's going to be technical announcements as well as additional webinars as we get more and more things out. Okay, so let's get to the topic at hand, our FW series controllers. So let's talk relatively quickly as far as some of the webinar controls. So the webinar controls, you will see, you should have a button here that says enter full screen. So I would suggest that you click that to enter full screen. That way you have the webinar as a full screen. You can view it better. It's up to you if you do it or do not, but that is available there for you. Down towards the bottom of the screen, you should see something like this. In the left-hand side, you will see your audio settings. That's pretty standard. But if you want to chat, click on the chat button. What happens is a little window comes up and it gives you the ability to chat with as well as everybody in the group, or just panelists or just the host. So you have that ability. If you need to send a message to somebody, you can do that. Another thing which we're going to get to towards the end of the webinar is Q&A, question and answer. So if you have a question towards the end of the webinar, what you'll do is you'll click on that button, you'll come in here, you'll type what you want to ask, hit the enter key, that will get sent off to me, and I will answer your questions the best that I can. Questions that are answered, we will show to everybody. So hopefully you'll have that capability to see that. And then obviously right towards the middle, you have the raise hand button. So if you want to, if I ask a question like, hey, who's all from the United States, you can click that and you can raise your hands or something like that. I don't typically do that inside of a webinar, but we have that capability. So just so you're aware that it's that. All right, so those are some of the very quick little things. Again, we will be getting to question and answers towards the end. So if you don't mind, kind of hold off on your questions unless it's something that you feel that you need to ask right now. I'll try to answer them as best as I can as we go through the webinar. Okay, so our FW series controllers, let's talk about them. So these are building automation controllers, network controllers that have IP connectivity to them. On top of being a standard IP connected device, they are also Wi-Fi. I say Wi-Fi specifically because a lot of times people will say wireless, and wireless is a very general term. Wireless can be Zigbee, it could be Z-Wave, it could be Bluetooth, it could be NFC, it could be this, that, and the other thing. But those are all relatively small, minute protocols in the marketplace compared to Wi-Fi. So our controllers, we have adapted Wi-Fi connectivity in them. Now, why did we decide that we wanted to do that? Well, the reason is because, quite honestly, Wi-Fi is everywhere, and it makes our jobs as system integrators and installers and programmers much easier than having to run wire. So because Wi-Fi and wireless is everywhere, it makes it easily to, if you want to call it, swallow. So when you go and talk to your network administrator or something and you say, hey, I have this controller I want to put on your Wi-Fi network, they're like, well, yeah, it's no big deal because it's just like a laptop or a phone or whatever. So it is really everywhere. If you look at, you can go to a Starbucks or a McDonald's or really about anywhere nowadays and get free Wi-Fi at their facility. So again, it's accepted everywhere. Now, Wi-Fi in the BAS industry or in the controls industry is a little bit different. The reason being is because it's relatively low bandwidth. We're not streaming data. We basically have packets of data that we send over, and then it kind of just sits there until there's either a request or there's a change of value, then we send it again. So usually it's not a big deal, and there's not a whole lot of bandwidth utilized on the network. So network administrators don't really get too bent out of shape when we say we're going to install 100 Wi-Fi devices on their system, because it's not like all 100 of those Wi-Fi devices are going to be streaming a video service like Netflix or Hulu. On top of that, because there's not a whole lot of data being sent, you don't really have to worry about delays or latency because it's relatively small packets. It kind of just goes out on the network, and because IP networks are so fast, the latency or the lag or delay is very, very little, if at all any. So wireless networks are also very ideal because there's usually not a single point of failure. Usually they'll have multiple access points that you can connect to, which is relatively nice. So if one access point goes down, you can either connect to another access point, or potentially you can very easily get an off-the-shelf access point to replace it. So the downtime in IP/wireless networks is usually very minute. All right, some more advantages of wireless architecture. Number one, any type of IP network is going to be faster, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So So we know RS-485 serial bus communication is still out there. We know that. You guys know that just as well as I do. But the fact of the matter is, continuing to install a serial bus communication is almost like going in and buying some type of an analog modem for your house. The old 56K beep burper eat modem. Nobody's doing that. And quite honestly, if the building technology people really understood our industry, they wouldn't allow you to do that because you're putting in antiquated technology. So IP networks are faster, number one. They're more fault tolerant, number two. Number three, typically it's less time to install because there's already going to be some type of a network infrastructure there. And then as well as they're going to be more secure. So that's from a very standard IP network. Now let's hop into Wi-Fi or wireless. So Wi-Fi, yes, you're absolutely going to be faster because you're not going to have to worry about typically running wire unless you're creating your own wireless architecture or network where you're actually installing the access points. You're not going to be running any wire. The system's going to the system in the network's going to already be there. You're just going to be connecting or piggybacking on the existing infrastructure. You can actually deploy systems during the normal business hours, typically, because you're not having to pop ceiling tiles all over the place and run wire across the building. So that correlates to less business interruption. People hate when you're sitting there trying to throw ladders over top of people's desks. People get mad about that. It puts dust on their workspace. People get mad about that. So the less you have to disturb a business, the better. And because wireless is very easy and fully adopted in buildings, it becomes very, very easy to add more devices. Think about it just like when you walk into an airport or a hotel. You walk in with your laptop, you walk in with your phone, you connect up to the Wi-Fi, and you don't even think about it. That's how we want our industry to go, is we're like, I just want to take a rooftop unit controller or a VAV box controller, connect up to the wireless network, and don't even consider anything else about it. I'm connected and I'm going. Now, cheaper. Typically, I'm going to say it's cheaper because it's less labor intensive than having to run wire. So you don't really need to hire an electrician to run that wire, potentially put it in conduit or something along those lines. You don't have to bust holes in walls. You don't have to repaint. You don't have to do plaster. That's a typical installation. Now, there are going to be times where the customer's not going to allow you to be on their own their infrastructure, and you're going to have to run your own. In that case, there will be cost. Absolutely. You're going to have to purchase access points, run wire, and so on and so forth. But typically, it's still going to be somewhat cheaper than running a boatload of wire from one node to another node to another node. Safer. It's typically safer. Wi-Fi is typically safer as well because you're not having to get up above a ceiling where there could potentially be some type of dust, mold, asbestos, or something along those lines, those airborne hazards. If anybody has been in a hospital and had to run wire, you know it's pretty miserable. Hospitals are obviously very clean style and sterile environments. So when you have to pop ceiling tiles, you usually have to get some type of a HEPA tent to block that tile location to where you stick a ladder up, you open a tile, you run your wire, you put the tile back, you move on to the next. It takes a lot of time and a lot of hassle. So Wi-Fi makes things a lot easier. And one of the best and most important things about Wi-Fi is that last item there. It preserves the building aesthetics. So if you go to an old historical, nice architecture building, whether it's a church, a hospital, a library, or something like that, those buildings typically do not, or those building managers typically do not want you to be, busting holes in their marble walls or limestone walls or running wire mold or wire duct down, a wall. So by installing a access point or a couple access points, you should be able to connect multiple devices without having to be too intrusive on the building aesthetics. All right, so because of all that things, here's what EasyIO came out with. We came out with our FW series controllers. So we currently have 3 flavors of the controller out. We have an FW08V as in Victor. That's the one off to the left-hand side with the little red box. We have the FW14, which is the one in the middle, and the FW08, which is the one off to the right. So what's the difference? Quite honestly, it's only I/O. So inputs and outputs. So the FW8V as in Victor has 4 universal inputs and 4 analog outputs, plus we add a differential pressure sensor on it to do flow control, mainly meant for a VEV box or something along those lines. The FW8 is the exact same controller without the pressure sensor. The FW14, that controller has, excuse me, it has 8 universal inputs, 2 digital outputs, and 4 universal outputs. So it gives you some additional I/O capabilities. We see the FW14 being used a lot in rooftop style applications. Now you may ask, well, how do I do all of my 2-stage heat, 2-stage cool with only having 2 digital outputs? We offer a FR02 relay module where you take an analog signal, a 0 to 10 analog signal, and it will control 2 digital outputs. So basically almost like a staging relay. So that gives you that ability to do 2 stages heat, 2 stages cool, plus having a fan on-off control, and then additionally having a free output to do something else with on the FW14. Now, the FW series controllers are Wi-Fi access points as well as Wi-Fi clients, meaning that I can actually connect to my customer's network, or I can have other devices connect to this controller itself. One of the best things about it is you can take your phone or your laptop, connect up to the controller without it being connected to a network, and do all the network configuration from a laptop browser or a mobile phone or a tablet browser. Very, very cool. It does have 2 Ethernet ports towards the bottom of the controller, the bottom right, you'll see them there. Those are 10100 non-bridged Ethernet ports. You do have the ability to daisy chain those from one controller to another. We do suggest limiting the amount of controllers you daisy chain, and I will talk about that here in a little while. As with almost all of our controllers, they do have a real-time clock. We do have live programming, so when you make that connection to do programming, it is all live. So if I tell a relay or an output to go on, a relay or an output will go on. Very, very nice. You have the ability to program the controller via our CPT programming tool, or if you're using something like Niagara AX, you can program it through the Niagara AX workbench. Niagara 4 guys, sorry, Tritium removed the ability to do programming for Sedona controllers in Niagara 4. So if you're a Niagara 4 guy, definitely plan on using our CPT programming tool, or you can always use your Niagara AX workbench if you like that. We do have the ability to power the controllers via 24-volt AC DC. I will always 100% of the time suggest you power it with 24-volt DC if at all possible. 24-volt DC is a much cleaner power supply, and you will have less problems with it. I will also always suggest doing an isolated transformer. So if you have a device or a piece of equipment like a rooftop unit that has a 24-volt power supply in it, please do not use that 24-volt power supply. That 24-volt power supply is very cheap and it's junk, and you will most likely get noise and interference back up through the power supply, which then will be fed into the controller, and it will cause problems. So try to do an isolated power supply if at all humanly possible. And then on top of that, definitely try to do DC. All right, these controllers all have a HTML5 dashboard capability to them. So no animated fans and dampers, but you do have gauges, widgets, push buttons, text editors, and all of that stuff. We will show that later when we get into a different webinar where we actually go over the dashboarding capabilities, how to set that up, and how to play with it. These controllers are BACnet IP server devices, so you can take whatever you program, pass that out via the BACnet IP network to some type of a front end like EasyStack or an FS32 or potentially Niagara. On the client side, we have BACnet IP client, meaning that I can take other devices and bring them into my controller via BACnet, but I can only do a maximum of 5 devices. And I can also take in BACnet MSTP into this controller with a maximum of 5 devices, 5 total, 5 BACnet and 5 BACnet IP and MSTP, not 5 of each. Okay, so the idea behind this controller is that you take a variable frequency drive or something along those lines, wire the MSTP into the controller, discover the points from the frequency drive, and then you can do programming, load shedding, or whatever you need to in the controller. All right. Because these are IP controllers, we have to deal with network security. So network security is a big deal for us. Like I mentioned in one of the previous slide, in the roadmap slide, 8021X for network security. 8021X is a node authentication style scheme where you plug an IP connected node into the network. It actually has to authenticate with a server that says, hey, I have a certificate. Yes, I can communicate. At that point, you're now allowed on the network to communicate. So very, very strict node authentication. It's been around for a long time, believe it or not, everybody. And your laptop already has 8021X built into it. So we're just actually taking that protocol, that technology, and bringing it into the building automation world. WPA Enterprise, this is a more secure node-to-node style or node-to-server style security scheme as well for Wi-Fi. The idea behind it is you would take your connected device, again, it authenticates with a server that basically says, yes, I'm allowed to be on the network, and then you can communicate. WPA Enterprise is, I'm not going to say a standard, but it is used very greatly in government facilities, banking facilities, as well as hospitals and big industries like that. And then obviously you have your TLS 1.2. TLS and SSL kind of go synonymous with each other. TLS is the new version of SSL, so we have TLS 1.2 in our controllers for communication encryption. All right, here's a little better look at the controller as far as what you have inside of it, what we can do with it. So we do deal with open communication protocols, BACnet IP, like I mentioned, to serve out data, BACnet IP as well as BACnet MSTP to bring BACnet data into the controller. 2 Ethernet ports that will connect up to the network if you choose to be hardwired. If not, that's okay. You can do TCOM, SOCKS, P2P. P2P is our peer-to-peer protocol. That is basically for global point sharing with EasyIO. We'll have another webinar about that coming up later in the year. And then obviously you have all of your input-output terminals. The input-output terminals are very easily removable. So if something happens and you do need to replace a controller, you don't need to unwire everything. You literally just pull the terminals out, put the new controller in, slap the terminals back in, and you're off and running. There are 2 antennas on the controller. The controllers are not like an input and an output antenna. They both do the same thing, both send and receive. If you're kind of a nerdy guy, you understand Wi-Fi a little bit. These are 2 dBi gain antennas. So it actually helps with the signal. It actually gains you some signal strength. So if you decide that the signal strength is not high enough and you need to get more, you can actually replace these. These are standard off-the-shelf style antennas. If you know EasyIO very well, we don't try to proprietarize anything. So if you need to get a different antenna, you can go on Amazon or whatever, and you can buy those. We also have some high gain antennas you can buy from us. Okay, because we're getting into the whole Wi-Fi world, here are some common problems that we deal with because our industry, our building automation, HVAC industry is just not that in tune with networks as a whole. I'm not saying that some of us aren't really good with networks, because we probably are. We've probably had to be, as you know, our network has been evolving into IP networks. But there's still some problems that are what I would call common problems as we kind of do this migration. The first one is lack of understanding of wireless technology. Now, Brian, what do you mean by that? Here's what I mean. We understand wireless and Wi-Fi as a concept. So I can take my phone, and I can take my laptop, and I can connect up to a wireless or a Wi-Fi network, and then boom, it's a done deal. But how much do we really know about that communication protocol, the different bands, the different channels, and all of that? Probably not as much as we need to. So that's an education thing we have to deal with. When we jump into the wireless world, there are different wireless protocols like I talked about. And unfortunately, there's just not a whole lot of good wireless technologies choices out there. So there's Zigbee, Z-Wave, Ocean, Bluetooth, NFC. There's a bunch of them out there, but none of them are really mainstream. Now, I'm not saying these protocols are bad. I am using almost every one of these protocols in my personal life, other than Ocean. I'm not a fan of Ocean personally, but I use Zigbee, I use Z-Weave, I use Bluetooth, I use NFC in my personal life every day, all day. Now, just because they work good in my personal life and say in my home or in my office, that does not mean they're going to work on a large scale at a commercial level, like at a hospital or a government facility. So, just not really out there. Because you have these poor choices, the reason that a lot of them are poor choices, I should say, is because the range is very, very low. So depending on the communication protocol you use, some of them you have to be within 15 feet or 5 meters to get a good signal, and that means line of sight. You throw a wall in the middle, and then all of a sudden you get no communication. So that's a big problem. Lack of redundancy. So typically there's no type of self-healing network properties like a self-healing mesh or potentially a spanning tree. So some of them have it. Zigbee and Z-Wave do have mesh technologies and they work relatively well, but that means you have to add more and more devices. So to get the communication to work the way you expect it, you may have to add an additional, Zigbee repeater or whatever, throw it above a ceiling that really doesn't do anything other than repeats the signal. Probably not the best solution. Here's a big one, lack of site survey. So when you get into wireless, any type of wireless, I don't care what you're deploying. I don't care if it's Wi-Fi, Zigbee, Z-Wave, I don't care. Please, please, please do a site survey. What I mean by site survey is go out there with some type of a test instrument. We'll talk a little bit more about this as we go through. We'll go and make sure that your communication protocols will work like the way you expect them to work. Maybe there's a big wall in the way. Maybe there's an I-beam. Maybe there's something along those lines. This will keep you from getting into trouble. Okay, site survey, very important. And improper security. So I know some of the Zigbees and the Z-Waves have started to add some security in their protocols, but they're still very lackluster compared to Wi-Fi. Because Wi-Fi is so broadly used, you got to make sure that it's secure. So you got to be able to play in that network administration realm where they want to have very, very secure networks. Okay, I'm not going to go through all this because I don't want to take up too much time. Again, these webinars are being recorded, so you can kind of go through this and look at this on your own. This is kind of like a good little checklist as you go through pre-installation. Here's the key thing with this whole. I'm gonna summarize this whole slide in one thing. Talk with your network administration people. So you go out to a job site to install it. Talk with them. Tell them you want to do a site survey, get information from them as far as whether they have VLANs, which is a virtual LAN, local area network. What are they doing? Are they going to let you on theirs? Are you going to have to create your own, so on and so forth? If you have to create your own, what type, are they going to require you to put in a certain type of equipment that's managed, unmanaged, so on and so forth, okay? So again, summarizing this slide, get in touch with your network administrator. Have to. I know typically we don't like the network people because they're usually relatively difficult to work with, but if you are proactive and you say, hey, here's what we're going to do, I want to make sure that you're comfortable with it, I want to work as a team, then that network administrator's guard immediately drops and he's like, yep, that person's like, yeah, I want to work with you, let's make sure we get it set up correctly, okay? Site survey. Site survey, site survey, site survey. I cannot say it enough, everybody. So when you go out to a site, again, when you're doing a wireless deployment, go out and do a site survey. There's lots of software out there that you can purchase or you can get for free that will do limited site surveys. The one on the screen looks like a heat map is what I like to call it. So the better the signal, the greener the color. So different site survey software do different things. Some will be red, some will be blue, some will be green, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's just a very easy way for you to, number one, see where you have gaps in your wireless signal. Okay, that's the key. So that's pre-installation. You go out there and you see what you got. All right, so now that you've done a site survey, you kind of see what's going on. Let's figure out what controllers we have and what our network architecture is going to look like. So just some different slides here that show the different wireless capabilities as well as wired capabilities that we have with our FW series controllers. So the first controller on the left is acting as an AP, which is also known as an access point. And then the two controllers on the right are directly connected to the first controller's wireless network. So there's no customer network here. I'm basically creating my own with 3 FW controllers. Now, out of that FW on the left, I have a hardwire Ethernet cable running back to some type of a server machine to do my front end control. That could be via an FS32 controller for a small to medium sized building. If I'm going to a larger building, I can go with either a Niagara front end or an Easy Stack. 100% up to you. Pick the best of breed. That's what we always suggest. Okay? On to the next one. This one looks very similar, but it's a little bit different. Same type of idea though. FW off to the left is the access point. The one in the middle is set up as a repeater, and the one off to the right is set up with a repeater. The problem with this installation is the FW onto the far right is too far away and cannot connect to the access point directly. So what we do is we say, okay, FW number 3, which is the one off to the right, I'm going to connect you to FW number 2, the one in the middle, and then I'm going to repeat that signal and connect back to the access point off to the left. So you can actually do that daisy chaining style mentality there. Okay? So we'll talk a little bit more about how much and how far and so on and so forth in a little bit. All right, you also have the ability to do daisy chaining. So let's say you do not like wireless, or you have a facility that just is non-conducive to a wireless installation. You can still use the controllers, just run Ethernet cable between them, and then you're good to go, and you're communicating via BACnet IP via an Ethernet cable. No problem. All right, this situation, we actually have where you're connecting to a customer's Wi-Fi. So customers got some type of a Wi-Fi network infrastructure. We have our controllers connecting to that network infrastructure that's already in place by the customer, and then again back up to a front end somehow. So that's basically us piggybacking onto the customer's network. That is pretty standard, I would say. And this one, very similar, except we have what I like to call a hybrid approach. So we are connected to the customer's Wi-Fi network, but for whatever reason, the FW off to the far right-hand side cannot get a good Wi-Fi signal. Let's say it's controlling something inside of a bank vault or something like that, and no Wi-Fi can work. So you actually just run a Cat5 cable from one of the controllers to the next controller, and then at that point, you have the ability to communicate with no problem. All right, give me 1 sec. I got a little chat message here. If a controller is connected to a repeater and goes down, does it connect to another, or does it go down? I'm thinking, Michael, what you're talking about. So if the first controller goes down, so let's say the middle controller, the FW right there, goes down, then the far right controller will lose network connectivity. Yes, correct. So there's no like failover, I guess, if you want to call it, to where if I lose connectivity from one thing, I go to another one currently. We are looking at getting some type of a true wireless mesh into our controllers by the end of this year. So if you do have, let's say, a controller go down, then you'll be able to connect, reroute to the network or something along those lines. So we are looking into adding that functionality. Hope that answered your question. If not, please feel free to elaborate later on in the question and answer. Okay, in this one, you do have a wireless connectivity or a wireless network, just like a lot of customers do, but for whatever reason, you either cannot or decide not to use the wireless, you can actually still daisy chain the Ethernet. So you can do all wireless, all Ethernet, or wireless and Ethernet hybrid. So you have a lot of functionality there to where or flexibility there to where you can do different things. Pretty cool. In this case, similar type as the other one, except there is no wireless network. Government facilities talk about, or a lot of government facilities do not want to have Wi-Fi. They'll make you shut it off. We have that ability to shut it off, the Wi-Fi, and you can actually just do full Ethernet, so no problem there. So again, we will talk about the Wi-Fi daisy chaining as well as the Ethernet daisy chaining here in a little bit, so I can give you as far as the best practices on that. So here's kind of a scenario where you can install an FW controller, connect to some other controllers via Wi-Fi, and then bring something in via BACnet MSTP. So in this case, we have one of our TSX room sensors that communicates BACnet MSTP to the FW controller that is then using it for control. And then we have some other devices, in this case, the FTO4, that is controlling potentially some lighting control. And those are communicated back to the FW controller via a Wi-Fi network. So lots of flexibility here, pretty cool. Okay, so here is our current lineup of wireless controllers that we have. FW8, FW8V as in Victor, again, that gives you your pressure sensor, and then the FW14. And then we have our FTO4 in the top right, which should be out here in the next quarter or two. Once we get the FW28 out, we'll get that onto the list as well. All of our controllers are BTL certified, as well as the Wi-Fi Alliance and FCC and all of your standard certifications, so you don't have to worry about anything there. All right, I'm gonna talk through these relatively quickly because I know we're running out of time. So signal propagation. So when we talk about Wi-Fi antennas or any type of antennas, there's two types. There's omnidirectional and there's what's called directional. We use what's called omnidirectional. So in the top left, what happens is that little ball looking thing on the stick, that is the end of the antenna. So that is how the signal goes out. So a lot of times what happens is people will do the bottom left picture where they'll actually have antennas pointing to each other. That is actually the worst thing you can do because they are not directional antennas. The signal does not point from the end of the antenna out. It actually goes out almost like what they call like a donut. So the idea behind it is to try to use your antennas where if it's facing vertically, the signal will go out horizontally like the top one. Now, the picture off to the right, we give an X by it because that is not ideal. Will it work? Yes, it will, but you will not have as good a signal as you would use in the top left picture there with the green checkbox. A lot of simple things that people don't pay attention to or don't know. So trying to just give you a little bit better installation information. Okay, so run through these relatively quickly. So now that you've got everything installed, verify your access points are actually working. I know this seems silly, but let's say you set everything up on a bench and then you go to install it in the world. Do not expect everything to just work, okay? Make sure that they're actually working. This is like your programming. You do programming in your house, offline. You dump it into a controller. Do you just dump it in and walk away? Absolutely not. You gotta make sure that your outputs and your inputs are working the way you expect. No difference here. Make sure that the network is connected and working like you expect it to. Double check your SSIDs. SSID is your wireless network name. So your wireless network name, make sure that it's connected to the one you want it to be connected to. Signal strength is strong. Make sure that it works. Verify your wireless coverage. How do we do that? Let's talk about it again. Check it out. You do another site survey. So you do a pre-installation site survey, see where your gaps are. Fix those gaps. After you get everything installed, do another site survey. Make sure things are working the way you expect them to work. If you need to modify anything, move a controller, change access points, add another access point. Please do that. This gives you the time to do it before you turn it over to the customer. Very, very important, okay? Channel assignments. When you come to one of our classes, or we'll potentially do it in another webinar, we'll talk about Wi-Fi channels. Think about channels like lanes on a highway. So the more congestion, if you have a 2-lane highway and you have a lot of cars, you have lots of congestion. If you have 12 lanes on a highway with a lot of cars, it's less congested. Same type of mentality goes here with Wi-Fi channels. So we'll talk about that more in a different webinar, or you can come to one of the trainings and we talk pretty in depth about that in our instructor-led trainings. And one of the last things gets overlooked a lot, the physical security of the access point. So if somebody can touch the access point, then it's not physically secure. Now, is that a problem or not? That's 100% up to your installation. Typically, access points will be mounted on a ceiling, above a ceiling, or really close to a ceiling. So they're not typically easily accessible. So just something to kind of keep in mind. There are installations where the access points will be completely secure inside of some type of an enclosure, a lockable enclosure with remote mount antennas. Okay, so very, very important to make sure and remotely mount those antennas. So one thing to kind of keep in mind is that anything that you have, like a metal box, a thick concrete wall, something like that, that will attenuate the signal, meaning that the signal will not go through that. Silly things such as rain, believe it or not. If you have rain, if you have outdoor if you have an outdoor installation and it's a torrential downpour, the rain will actually impede the signal strength. You may not think about it, but yeah, it does make sense, right? Because rain droplets are substance, it's mass. So that radio frequency or that Wi-Fi signal it takes more to get through that mass, which is the rain. So things to just kind of think about. Okay, so run speed tests. If you're worried about speed or things are operating slow, make sure and run speed tests. As-built, make sure you put your access point locations, just like you would typically on your as-built put in your thermostat locations as well as your VAV box locations. Take it one step further. Now, if you have access points, make sure you set those access points up. Network administrators will move access points on you without telling you. Well, this person's not getting a good enough signal. I'm going to move it 10 feet over this way. Well, moving it 10 feet over that way may hurt your connectivity via your building automation system. So it's good to have as-built. Okay. Admin access. Never leave any of your admin username and passwords as the defaults. So please, please, please make sure and put in a strong password to make sure that somebody's not getting in there and messing with your network. Always important. And last thing you do before you turn the job over, guess what? You do a site survey again. After you got everything all set up the way you want it to be, fantastic. Now what you do is you take the site survey, you actually export that, print it off, and then put that as part of your as-built. Very, very important, okay? So let me show one thing real quick. So this is what it looks like when you get into the FW series controller itself. To modify and configure up the wireless network. So you connect up to the controller, log into the controller. This is going to be the dashboard view that you'll see that we'll talk a little bit more about. You can see that it's got gauges, it's got widgets, text, all that stuff. So we have a sidebar that allows us to get into the utility. Inside of the utility, it'll take us to the network configuration piece. Inside of the network configuration, this is where you will modify your network configuration. In this case, I have mine set up as a repeater, meaning that it's connected to a wireless network. If I go ahead and click the scan button here, what'll happen is my controller will go and scan for all of the available wireless networks or Wi-Fi networks available. It'll put that into the drop-down list there, and I can select whichever Wi-Fi SSID I want to connect to. Notice in the parentheses, it's got a number. That number is signal strength. You want to make sure you have a very, very good signal strength, okay? Another cool thing about our controllers is we have two SSIDs. We have a public one that is where you would connect to, and then you also have a configuration one. This would be where you would take your laptop, your phone, or whatever, set up a direct connection from that controller to your laptop, and then you would have full connectivity access. That is what the configuration network piece is right there. Okay, so we're coming towards the end of this. Let me hit on two things, and then I'll open up the questions and answers. Daisy chain. So on the Wi-Fi piece, so if you want to daisy chain Wi-Fi, we suggest going no more than 2 tiers. So what I mean by that is going from one controller to another controller to another controller. All right, so 2 hops. So if you go more than 2 hops, you're going to have latency problems and potentially some upset customers because things aren't refreshing as fast as they want. So that's that in the daisy chain. If you are going to take multiple FWs and connect them back to one FW, we suggest no more than a 4-to-1. So if we have an FW set up as an access point, or a repeater, and I need to connect up some other controllers to my one FW controller, no more than 4 to 1, okay? Again, it boils down to latency. It really boils down to latency is the big deal. We don't want to have the controllers operating slow. And then there's also a fault tolerance piece to it. If I lose that one FW, then I just lost everything else connected to it. So think about it like a network switch. You have a network switch go down, then everything that is connected to that network switch goes down as well. We want to have it as least fault tolerant as possible. All right, now on to the Ethernet or the actual hardwired daisy chaining. We suggest no more than 9 controllers connected. Again, it goes back to latency. We do not want to have that connectivity or that data flow being slow. So we suggest no more than 9. Also, there is a fault tolerance piece with it. Our network ports are not bridged, meaning that if we take power off of them, the communication does not continue to flow. We do this purposefully. Inside of the IT industry, Cat5 cable can run 100 meters, so I typically say right around 300 feet. So if I have 5 controllers and they're 100 feet, or excuse me, they're 300 feet between each one, I'm okay as long as everything's powered up. If I bridge those and I power them down, then all of a sudden, guess what? My network cable is now 300 times 5, 1,500 feet, and that is not compliant, and we start having network connectivity problems, okay? So we do not bridge ours on purpose. So as a recap, Wi-Fi daisy chaining, no more than 2 hops. You can do 4 controllers connected to 1 controller, no problem. On the Ethernet daisy chaining, no more than 9 controllers connected in a daisy chain, okay? All right, so I think that is pretty much it on the webinar. I'm gonna open it up to question and answers. I went a little long, about 15 minutes long, so I'll open up for about 5 to 10 minutes on question and answers. Again, this will be, this webinar is being recorded, so you will have access to it via a link we will provide. So if there's any questions, feel free towards the bottom of the screen, hit the little Q&A, throw out your question and answer. While people are potentially writing their questions down, I'm going to throw this out. And number 1, say thank you very much for being here. We really, really appreciate it. We will ask that you definitely check out our website, www.easio.com. If you're in the Americas, go to the Americas. That will take you to www.easio.pro. If you have any feedback, you can also send feedback directly to training@easio.pro. That will come directly to our training department. You can say, hey, I like the webinar. I wish it had this, that, or the other thing, or whatever. There's also, when this webinar finishes, you will be prompted for feedback. I would highly appreciate if you would give feedback on future webinars you want to see. Like I mentioned, we're going to try to do one of these a month. So if there's a topic you want to go over, please feel free to do that. Go to our training schedule. So www.easio.pro/training-dates.html. You can also get that from our website as well, just by navigating through the menu structure. But our training calendar has webinars. It's got our instructor-led trainings. It's got all that stuff on there. So if you have any questions, comments, feedback, definitely feel free to do it. Wait a couple more minutes to see if there is any questions. So got a question. Is there typically an IT standard regarding daisy chaining? There, you know what? There kind of is and kind of isn't. So typically you'll say no more than 10 hops is what happens in network administration or network administrators say. I've been on sites where the network admin has been really, really strict and it said no more than 2 hops. So basically I come out of that network switch to my whatever, my one device, and I can only go one more device. So it really depends on your network administrator's infrastructure and what they allow. So I've seen as little as 2 and I've seen as much as 15. I've never seen any more than that. Typically in the IT industry, they'll do what they call either a star or a spider, where you'll have one central network switch and you'll home run every cable back to the network switch. So that's kind of normal. See if there's anything else here. I got a couple more. Let's see. Other than daisy chain and Wi-Fi, are there any other network architecture that you recommend? So Tommy, thanks for the question. So yeah, I'll tell you what, the best for as far as best practices and all that, the best thing to do is always to try to offload your network onto somebody else. So if you can take the controllers and you can put it onto your customer's network, like their infrastructure, that's the best thing to do, for sure. If you're okay, if you have to run wire, I would suggest go ahead and run the Cat6 cable as well. You know, if you can go with like a star style approach, it's always nice to make sure you have that network cabling there. I mean, let's be honest, a hard wire is going to always be more fault tolerant than Wi-Fi, because you never know if a network administrator is going to go ahead and move an access point or something along those lines. So it's definitely better to hardwire. But if your network is set up correctly with good Wi-Fi access points, then there's no problem. Let's see what else we got. It's the next webinar FT. Not yet. We're not going to do an FT webinar until the product is officially released here in the next month or two. So once we get that out, you will get notifications on the website. We'll put it up on LinkedIn. We'll put it on our Facebook page. We'll send out you know, our technical bulletins as well as our product announcement. So all of that stuff will be in there. We are very looking forward to the FT being released, probably as much as you. So so that will be a great webinar to attend as well. Our next webinar is actually on upgrading the firmware in an FC20 controller. Believe it or not, this was a request from our Facebook users. They said, wow, this would be great to actually be able to do that. I said, all right, well, let's throw it in a webinar. So if you use the FC20 and you do any firmware updates or have any questions about it, definitely go to our training calendar and register for that. Let's see. Will the FT, Peter, hey Peter, how are you? Will the FT04 be able to be a client on the Wi-Fi side and then serve the data out on the MSTP side? There is no plan to do BACnet MSTP serving on BACnet MSTP serving from the controller. Sorry. I know we run into that question quite often with the FW series controllers as well, but our plan is to serve out all data via BACnet IP. Jesse, great question. Any plans for PoE on the controllers? We talked about it. Quite honestly, the cost to put a PoE, if you want to call it the PoE circuitry in the controller, does not, what's the best way to put it? It's just not price competitive. Just for the simple fact that not everybody's going to use it and everybody would have to pay for it. So as we get more and more PoE installations, I can definitely foresee us doing PoE at the controller level instead of using like a splitter. I asked the exact same question to our development team, but right now, if we put it in there, there's probably going to be maybe 5% of the usage of people using PoE, and the other 95% would have to pay for it. So unfortunately, not at this time, but I can foresee that coming sometime in the near future. Let's see. Tyler, how are you, Tyler? Will PoE adapters serve as single source of power on controllers? If so, what would the load limitations be? Okay, so here's what it's going to boil down to. Depending on if you have high power PoE or not, is depending on how much you can actually power at the controller. The idea behind it is the PoE is really going to be there to power the controller and the outputs, not any external equipment like valves or actuators or stuff like that. Now, again, it really is going to depend on what, you know, if you have high power, then I believe, I'm trying to remember the exact specs on the splitter. I don't want to comment because I'm probably going to be wrong, just to be honest, everybody. But I know our design is to just power the controller and the outputs on the controller, not the devices like the actuators or something like that. So, but keep your eyes peeled on that. All right, I'm going to give another couple seconds here for any other questions or maybe anybody that might need clarification. Couple more seconds. Hey, Mark, I didn't forget about you here. We will talk more on the daisy chaining with your site offline. So, all right, anybody else? All right, that looks like it. All right, thank you everybody so much for your time. Really, really do appreciate it. Again, you will get a feedback survey. Please feel free to be as critical as you want. Just don't tell me I suck and then not give me a reason why I suck, if you don't mind. If you say, hey, the webinar was bad and here's why, definitely let me know why. That way I can always improve on myself. Go to our website. Via the website, to access certain things, you will need to register. Please feel free to register. That will get you into different parts and pieces of the website to where you can actually download certain things. Always check on our training schedule. We will always be updating more and more webinars, as well as our instructor-led trainings all over the United States. Really, really appreciate everybody's time. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll talk to you at the next one. Thanks so much. Have a great day.